to talk about logical fallacies. The first question is, what is logic, which isn't a fallacy? Well, for logic to be sound, it must be both valid, structure makes sense, and true. Starting points aren't rubbish. So logic tends to be a collection of points which are factual and linked together properly. Okay, so a logical fallacy is a flaw in the reasoning for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes they're intentional, sometimes they're unintentional, and often the effect of them is to stop any further exploration of the issue, which can be very destructive. Okay, so sometimes they can be quite effective. Lots of reasons why. So let's have a look at some fallacies. Okay, straw man, the classic. Okay, the straw man fallacy misrepresents someone's argument to make it easy to attack. Instead of engaging with what was actually said, the speaker creates a weaker version, a straw version, and knocks it down instead. Okay, so straw man is a bit of a sneaky way to counter somebody else's point of view. Okay, so it's a relatively common one. Ad hominem, also known as personal attack. This fallacy attacks the person instead of the argument. Instead of debating the idea, it goes after the speaker's character, appearance, job title, or history. It might be person's qualifications or their credibility or their level of education. All these things are relevant to the actual thing, case in point. Fallacy number 3, false dilemma. This is basically one of the forms of black and white thinking, also called stinking thinking. This fallacy presents only two options when more exist. If you're not with us, you're against us. Choose A or B, but don't ask about Z through C. Okay, so it's basically saying it's either one thing or the other, nothing else. But there's plenty of cases where there are good alternatives apart from the two presented. Okay, so fallacy 4, appeal to popularity. This fallacy assumes that if many people believe something, it must be true. It's the logic of fashion trends, bandwagons, and pop radio. Lots and lots of people doing something, yeah, it's always good. Well, sometimes, but not always. Fallacy number 5, slippery slope. This fallacy suggests that a relatively small step will inevitably lead to a chain of disastrous events, like sliding down a hill made of soap and doom, in this case, being chased by some giant rock or something. Okay, so sometimes true, sometimes isn't. Fallacy number 6, circular reasoning. This fallacy tries to prove a point by assuming the point is already made. The conclusion is essentially a restatement of the premise. It's like trying to explain why the sky is blue by saying because it's not red. Well, it's a bit like saying the colour blue is blue because it's blue. Fallacy number 7, false cause. Okay. This fallacy assumes that just because one thing happened before another caused a second thing. It seems like maybe the crow came up and the man is sinking because of that. The sun came up afterwards. And they were really nothing to do with each other. Okay, number 8, appeal to emotion. This is a big one. This fallacy attempts to persuade by manipulating emotions rather than using reason. Fear, pity, guilt, or outrage replace facts. Okay, so sometimes for quite invalid reasons. Fallacy 9, appeal to authority. This fallacy attempts to prove a claim by citing someone who's not a genuine expert or is an expert in one area but not in this one. Sometimes it's just a celebrity in a lab coat. Anyway, sometimes even the genuine experts aren't right. Fallacy 10, bandwagon fallacy, a bit like the appeal to popularity, also known as peer pressure logic. Everybody else is doing it, so it must be right. Turns popularity into a substitute for truth. Fallacy 10, no true Scotsman. This fallacy redefines a category to exclude counterexamples. Protects a generalization by claiming that's not a true example. No true Scotsman would do that. Fallacy number 12, anecdotal fallacy. This fallacy uses a personal story or isolated example to disprove data. It goes something like, I know somebody, as if that one example outweighs a mountain of research. I know someone who smoked till they were 100 and they were okay. Fallacy 13, false equivalent. Looks like hamburgers being compared with is it an apple? I'm not sure. Anyway, this fallacy claims that two things are the same when they're not, often to make a weak point seem stronger by association. Just because two things share one trait doesn't mean they're morally or logically equal. Fallacy 14, genetic fallacy. This fallacy judges an idea based on its source. Who said it, where it came from, or how it began, instead of examining the idea itself. Wow, the idea itself is what's important. Fallacy 15, red herring. Look at the size of it. The red herring fallacy distracts from the real issue with something irrelevant. It's the intellectual equivalent of, look, a squirrel. Now, what's a squirrel got to do with anything? Fallacy 16, begging the question. Not what most people think it means. This fallacy assumes the conclusion within the premise, essentially saying this is true because it is. Okay, it's, well, isn't it true because it is? Fallacy 17, appeal to nature. This fallacy assumes that something natural is automatically good, right, or healthier, that unnatural is bad or wrong. Nature gets romanticised. However, nature has also provided it with arsenic, hurricanes, and parasites. Well, sometimes natural is good, but sometimes not. Fallacy 18, you too. This fallacy avoids criticism by turning its back on the accuser. You do it too. It doesn't actually defend the action, just points out hypocrisy. Fallacy 19, appeal to tradition. This fallacy argues that something is right or better just because it's old or has always been done that way. We've always done it isn't a reason, it's an historical note. Fallacy 20, appeal to novelty. The opposite of the previous fallacy. This one assumes something is better because it's new, trendy, or modern. It treats recency as proof of quality. What is interesting is sometimes appeal to tradition and appeal to novelty are combined. Appeal to ignorance. This fallacy claims something must be true because it hasn't been proven false, or false because it hasn't been proven true. Lack of evidence is treated as evidence. Fallacy 22, composition. This fallacy assumes that what is part of the parts, true of the parts, must also be true of the whole. Fallacy 15, 23. The opposite of the composition fallacy. It assumes that what is true of the whole must also be true of the parts. Moving the goalpost, quite a tough job. This is also known as raising the bar. When someone's claim is disproven or met, they shift the criteria to avoid admitting they're wrong. Loaded question. This fallacy poses a question that contains an unfair assumption, typically one that traps the answerer regardless of their response. Middle ground. This fallacy assumes that truth must lie somewhere between two opposing opposites. Sometimes compromise is wise. Sometimes it's just mathematically lazy. Appeal to consequences. This fallacy argues that something must be true or false based on whether the outcome would be good or bad. But truth doesn't care about your comfort. Equivocation. This fallacy uses the same words with multiple meanings, slipping between definitions mid-argument. I mean, what does unfair mean anyway? Guilt by association. This fallacy attacks an idea or person by linking them to something disreputable, even if the connection is flimsy or irrelevant. Appeal to hypocrisy. Similar to the U2 fallacy, but more focused on invalidating a position by pointing out the speaker's failure to live up to it. Personal incredulity. This fallacy says something must be false because it's hard to believe, understand, or imagine. Can't imagine that one. Argument from silence. This fallacy assumes something is true or false because no one has said otherwise. Silence is treated as proof. Silence isn't a substitute for proof. Appeal to spite. This fallacy plays on resentment or bitterness to reject a claim. Why should they benefit when it comes to driving logic? I think I've corrected that little error there. Appeal to flattery. This fallacy uses compliments to sway someone rather than actual reasoning, also known as buttering up. Compliments are not conclusions. Chronological snobbery. This fallacy judges ideas based on age, assuming that new is better or older is wiser, without regard to actual merit. Time is not a truth test. The Varna fallacy. This fallacy rejects a solution because it's not perfect, comparing a real option to an impossible idea. Don't let perfect be the enemy of better. Appeal to wealth. This fallacy assumes that someone is rich or a product is expensive, they must be right, successful, or correct. Having money does not equal having logic. Appeal to poverty. The reverse of the last fallacy. It assumes someone is morally superior or more insightful just because they're poor or humble. Wisdom isn't measured by your bank balance. Moral equivalence. This fallacy compares minor wrongdoings with major ones, suggesting they're morally the same, which can downplay serious issues or exaggerate trivial ones. Scale matters. Appeal to force. This fallacy uses threats instead of reasoning. It says, agree or else. Replaces logic with intimidation. They threaten instead of explain. It's not an argument, it's bullying. Appeal to accomplishment. This fallacy assumes someone is right because they've achieved a lot, such as fame, awards, and records, as if success in one area equals truth in another. Impressive people can be still wrong outside their area of expertise. Spotlight fallacy. This fallacy assumes that the media's coverage of a topic accurately reflects its prevalence or significance. If it's on the news a lot, it must be everywhere. The camera lens doesn't show the whole world. Survivorship bias. This fallacy focuses on successful examples while ignoring those that failed and disappeared. That's why we hear from lottery winners, not ticket buyers. For every survivor, there are 1,000 you never heard of. Definist fallacy. This fallacy redefines a key term in a way that supports your argument, often by smuggling in value judgments or changing the meaning mid-conversation, where on arguments built on slippery definitions. Reductio ad Hitlerem. This fallacy tries to discredit an idea by comparing it to something Hitler or the Nazis believed or did. It's It's a kind of guilt by association, taken to historical extremes. If your argument requires Hitler, reconsider your approach. Argument from personal experience. This fallacy treats one personal experience as overriding broader evidence or reasoned analysis, as if the lived experience automatically equals proof. Anecdotes are not data. Misleading vividness. This fallacy uses a dramatic, vivid event to outweigh statistical reality. It's emotionally powerful but logically weak. Vivid does not equal typical. Complex question. A complex question contains hidden multiple assumptions within a single question, usually forcing the responder into a trap. It's loaded with assumptions. Handle with care. False analogy. This fallacy compares two things that aren't really alike in irrelevant ways, often to draw a misleading conclusion. And analogies are tools, not truth. Incomplete comparison. This fallacy compares two things without specifying what is being compared, leaving out key details. Better, faster, stronger than what exactly? Fallacy. This fallacy says if an argument contains a fallacy, then the conclusion must be false, even though it could still be true, just badly argued. Bad logic does not necessarily lead to a false conclusion, just a bad argument. Broken-winded fallacy. An economic fallacy that assumes destruction is beneficial because it creates activity, ignoring what could have been done instead. Ignoring the question. This fallacy avoids the real issue by answering a different question, offering something easier, safer, or unrelated. A graceful dodge is still a dodge. Too much of a stretch. This fallacy leaps too far from the facts, drawing conclusions that don't reasonably follow. It's like logical overreach. That escalated quickly. The Texas sharpshooter. This fallacy cherry-picks data to support a conclusion after the fact, much like shooting at a wall and then drawing a target around the bullet holes. Patterns can be real or painted on. Appeal to possibility. This fallacy assumes, because something is possible, it is certain or likely to occur. Just because it could happen doesn't mean it will. Possible doesn't mean probable or wise. Appeal to complexity. This fallacy claims that because something is complicated, no one can understand it, or that all opinions are equally valid. Complex does not equal incomprehensible. Appeal to consequences of belief. This fallacy argues that a belief is true or false based on whether believing it would be good or bad for us. Believability isn't determined by comfort. Double standard. This fallacy applies different rules to similar situations depending on who's involved, usually favouring one side unfairly. One standard, please, not two. False attribution. Attribution. This fallacy wrongly attributes a quote fact or idea to someone, often to boost credibility. Check your sources. Not every quote in italics is real. Begging the label. This fallacy uses a loaded label to categorize something and pretends that label proves the point, essentially assuming what needs to be shown. Labels aren't arguments. I've got the wrong version here. Anyway, the continuum fallacy. This fallacy argues because no clear line can be drawn between two extremes, no distinction exists at all. Fuzzy boundaries still separate things. False attribution of motive. This fallacy dismisses a viewpoint based on assumptions about the speaker's motives, real or imagined, rather than engaging with the argument. Motivation does not equal invalidation. If buy whiskey. This fallacy uses vague emotional language to make both sides of an argument sound appealing or terrible without actually making a choice. This is an argument. It's dodgeball with big balls. False cause. This fallacy assumes because two things happen together, one must cause the other. Correlation is mistaken for causations. Two things happening together doesn't mean one caused the other. Or triviality. This fallacy occurs when more attention is given to trivial details than to the main issue, because the trivial stuff is easier to grasp. Big issues get ignored when small ones are easy. Appeal to fear. This fallacy uses fear, not evidence, to persuade. The idea is to agree or terrible things will happen. Fear sells but rarely proves anything. Motivated reasoning. Self-serving. This isn't a traditional fallacy but a powerful mental trap. It means starting with the conclusion you want, then bending the reason to fit. Wanting something to be true doesn't make it so. Argument for popularity. This fallacy says something must be true or good because many people believe it. The logic of fads, mobs, and marketing. Popularity isn't proof. Broken analogy or false analogy. This fallacy tries to argue a point by using an analogy that doesn't really hold. The comparison is misleading or exaggerated. The analogy limps, the argument probably does too. Argument by definition. This fallacy defines terms in a way that ensures a desired outcome, turning the conclusion into a definition. And definitions carry arguments, look out. This fallacy uses a personal story as the main evidence, often ignoring larger trends or data. Stories are memorable, but not always meaningful. Appeal to ridicule. This, check out the arms. Okay. This fallacy mocks an argument instead of addressing it. Instead of making something sound silly proves it wrong. Sarcasm isn't a substitute for substance. Just world fallacy. This fallacy assumes that the world is fair. People will always get what they deserve. They deserve what they get. The world is not a neat morality play. Fallacy of division of labour. This fallacy assumes that somebody else will handle a problem, so there's no need to act on it yourself. Often found lurking in groups and bureaucracies. When everybody assumes somebody else will act, no one does. Argument from force of habit. This fallacy assumes that something must be right or best simply because it has always been done. Tradition isn't automatically truth. Appeal to flawlessness. This fallacy dismisses a system or idea entirely because it's not perfect, even if it's vastly better than the alternatives. Seeking perception is noble. Expecting it everywhere is folly. Conspiracy theory thinking. This fallacy assumes that any lack of evidence proves how clever the cover-up must be. It's self-sealing and resists contradiction. Theory that can't be disproven isn't a strong theory. It's theology in a trench coat. Fallacy of fairness. This fallacy assumes the world should be fair, that all ideas must be treated equally regardless of merit. Fairness always equal airtime. The fallacy. This fallacy assumes that someone uses four logic, the conclusion must be wrong, even if they happen to be right by accident. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. The gambler's fallacy. This fallacy assumes that past random events affect future ones, as if the universe owes you a win. Chance doesn't keep a scoreboard. Poisoning the well. This fallacy tries to discredit someone before they've even said anything, by casting doubt on their motives, character, or reliability in advance. It's a preemptive smear campaign disguised as a helpful warning. Rather than addressing the argument, it attacks the speaker to bias the audience. Once the well is poisoned, everything the target says is assumed tainted. Passive voice evasion. This rhetorical trick avoids accountability by using passive voice, dodging who actually did something. If no one did it, can't be blamed. The gun fired by itself. False balance. This fallacy assumes two sides must be equally valid just because they exist, even when one has overwhelming evidence. Balance is not equal to the quality of nonsense and knowledge. Appeal to pity. This fallacy attempts to win an argument by exploiting the audience's sympathy, guilt, or compassion, rather than addressing the facts. It's emotional blackmail in a friendly voice. Feeling sorry for someone doesn't mean they're right. And taking heartstrings doesn't strengthen logic, just knots it up. Appeal to normality. This fallacy assumes that something must be right, safe, or acceptable simply because it's considered normal. Common doesn't mean correct. Equivocation by euphemism. This fallacy disguises something unpleasant by using vague or soft language, often to make the unacceptable sound normal. Word games don't change reality. Quantitative fallacy. This fallacy assumes that something can be measured. It's the most important thing, or that what can't be measured doesn't matter. Numbers are useful, not omniscient. Appeal to innovation. A twist on the appeal to novelty. This one argues something superior simply because it's modern or innovative, even if it hasn't been tested. New isn't always improved, just new. Appeal to antiquity. A close relative to the appeal to tradition. This version insists that old ideas must be superior because they lasted so long. Age brings wisdom, or just very old mistakes. Appeal to natural. Another version of the natural is good fallacy. But focus on moral and social norms, assuming natural behaviour is automatically correct. Nature isn't always your moral compass. The hedging fallacy. This fallacy involves padding arguments with vague disclaimers to make them unfalsifiable, so if they fail, the speaker can claim they never really said that. You can't be pinned down, you can't be held accountable. This downplays the not as bad fallacy. This downplays a problem by pointing to a worse one. Says suffering much less reach Olympic levels before it matters. Yes, someone always has it worse. That doesn't mean nothing matters. The euphemism fallacy. This fallacy replaces accurate or harsh terms with soft, vague, softened, or misleading terms in order to downplay or sanitize unpleasant truths. It's language in a lab coat, sounding neutral but masking harm, deceit, or seriousness. Euphemisms are often used to manipulate emotions, evade responsibility, or make something unethical seem acceptable. Politicians advertisers and bureaucrats are among the most frequent offenders. Self-sealing argument. A self-sealing argument is constructed, so it can't be disproved no matter what. Any evidence against it is reinterpreted as support or dismissed as irrelevant. It's like arguing with a conspiracy theory wrapped in Teflon. Nothing sticks and logic slides right off. These arguments are immune to facts because they are designed this way. They often redefine terms or invent justifications to protect the core belief from scrutiny. Argument from lack of imagination. This fallacy claims that because the speaker can't imagine an alternative, none must exist. It's intellectual claustrophobia. Just because you can't picture it doesn't mean it's impossible. Fallacy of the single cause. This fallacy assumes that one thing is the sole cause of a complex situation, oversimplifying and ignoring contributing factors. Life is rarely that simple. Looks like she's driven over a banana skin that's made the car crash. The masked man fallacy. This fallacy confuses identity in logic. Assuming that two descriptions differ, they must refer to different things. Logic gets wobbly when names change. Broken burden of proof. This fallacy unfairly shifts the burden of proof, often demanding that others disprove something instead of proving it oneself. Making a claim, you prove it. 100-foot terminating cliche. This fallacy uses a trite, often comforting phrase to shut down critical thought, replacing reason with slogans. Catchphrases are conclusions. So there you have it. So had a very quick overview of 100 different fallacies without examples in most cases, and the quiz questions that came with them. And there's quite a few sections after that and before that. Well, anyway, thank you for watching. What's happened to my control? Oh, there it is.